Hello and welcome to All Politics is Local. Today we're going to be talking with some folks from Clinton, so we'll call this a Clinton conversation. Interestingly, as a Connecticut Yankee, born in Storrs and raised on Moulton Road on Mountain Creamery, I am fascinated by the fact that our two guests today come from the great state of New York and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts originally, and we're going to find out about them and how they came to Clinton. So let me introduce you to our guests. Welcome, Christine
Goupil.
Goupil, I knew I'd say it wrong, the first selectman by charter of the town of Clinton, and Mary Beth Breen, I knew I wouldn't get that one wrong, who is the director of the Henry Hull Library.
Yes.
And we are very pleased, I say we, I mean all the people watching, and I'm hoping there will be a lot, finding out about the community of Clinton. And it is, as you know better than I, a wonderful community. I've had the privilege of going to your, I'm trying to think of in what order I was introduced to Clinton. I'm pretty sure it was the Outlet Mall at Clinton Crossing. And that was followed by going down to the Clinton Beach, the Children's Beach, on off-season when out-of-towners from Guilford were allowed. And heading on to the Hanami restaurant, my son's very favorite Japanese restaurant, Hibachi, right there across from Liberty Green. And on to the Andrews Theater, where my wife did the first shows for Connecticut Playwrights Theater with a poetry society out of Guilford, oddly enough, and a cast that went from up and down the shoreline and came to the Andrews under one of your former first selectmen, Selectman Fritz. So, if I may, I'll introduce you and you'll introduce yourselves and tell how you got where you are in those two very crucial leadership positions in Clinton.
Let's start with me.
I'd love to.
So I had a sort of long circuitous route to Clinton. I originally grew up in upstate New York, and from there I went to university in downstate New York and then ended up in New York City working there. From New York City, I ended up meeting my husband who lived in San Francisco, and I ended up moving to San Francisco. It was during the .com era, so jobs were plenty out in San Francisco. Moved out there, ended up working for KPMG for a period of time, and my husband was then offered a job in Britain. So we went to Britain for about 5 years. Took me a year to get my visa. And then I started working for the Princess Foundation in Britain. Then we started to decide to move back to the United States, and we ended up looking for places that were along public transportation lines with access to airport, etc. And we started looking from New York City all the way up to Maine, and we had the opportunity to live anywhere we wanted, really, on the East Coast. And somehow we found Clinton. Loved the house. Victorian house, not very frilly, but very simple, but extremely well built. And we started to get to know the community a little bit. Neighbors came out of the woodwork to welcome us, and we were home. You talk about the beaches, it's phenomenal beaches. We can walk to the downtown. We got Hammonasset, which is right next door, beautiful state beach. And we've got a train station right in our downtown that can get you to New York City or back to Boston. And so for us, it was where you would retire. We live to work and work, be able to retire in the community and live there.
Wonderful. And we'll circle back around to a couple of those things. Cedar Island being part of Hammonasset, and the newly built train station and how that affects the community. But you graciously left the most important jewel in the crown of Clinton out, and I'll let you describe your library.
The library.
And your background.
Well, so my husband and I both grew up outside Boston and got married and moved to Connecticut and didn't do as much research, unfortunately, but knew we needed to be near sort of a hub, so we looked at New Haven and thought Branford would be where we would live just because of the size of the community. And lo and behold, we ended up at a realtor and then renting a cute little place in Madison, and then from there bought a home in Clinton and have been there for close to 36 years. We love the people, we love the community. It's just a welcoming, comfortable community, I want to say. So just great people from all walks who care about the community. So I sort of have a paralegal-ish background. There was no real market for it in Connecticut, and I got roped into some sales work and traveled all over the state. And then I had some small children and wanted to sort of stick nearby, and volunteered in the school libraries. And it was just at the beginning of the internet and the computer sort of age, and got hooked and saw the research part of it. So went back to school, got my master's, and worked at the Clinton Library, at the Henry Carter Hall Library. And it was a crucial time for us because we were moving. The building itself was a cute little brick building downtown, yet it was one book in, one book out, and 8 parking spots. Mm-hmm. So it was a magical time. A beautiful piece of property came up and available, and it took a community actually to get us to our new position. And with that opening of the doors, I took over in the reference department, which I loved because, again, it was sort of the paralegal and the research background, and was pretty happy to be in that position. We had a tragedy. My director passed away young, and then the position came open, and it was time. It was time for me to sort of be the steward, and it's such a special place, and it has such a great reputation that I felt like I needed to take a chance. And so I've been the director there now for 14, 15 years. And I love it. It's something different every day. The people are great. It's different in that I deal more with downtown, in the budget system and the finance department, that piece. But, everybody is in it for the same reason. Everybody's looking to move the community forward, and it's a great community. I've had 2 homes in Clinton, and I hope to be able to stay there, for my next and final home, hopefully. Yeah.
Maybe a Georgian. You mentioned Victorian, but
yeah, but something
Georgians
a little smaller,
classic,
maybe.
Footprint of how Clinton's identified.
Right.
You both have given me food for thought, and I think our viewers some things to hear in the coming hour. But the most important thing of all the things that you said, I think, was feeling a responsibility to take on the stewardship. And obviously you felt the same. And I think perhaps people looking at the title of this show might think this was going to have Senator Needleman and Representative McLaughlin and Senator Courtney, Representative Courtney or what have you. We may talk politics. It happens that on the day we're taping there is a big speech going on somewhere down in Washington, but also a big parade going on somewhere up in Boston, which I know you're wishing that you could join. You are vicariously and in your heart anyway, I know. So the stewardship piece, I think all of us have come to this place for the same reason. And what drew me to Clinton, as distinct from what Madison represents with its beautiful little downtown, and what Westbrook represents with its sort of classic waterfront community, I think, in many, many ways. Clinton has its own character. And I think probably starting with the Hammonasset days, when it was a large area between Guilford and Old Saybrook back in the 1600s, and then Yale's foundation, onward over to Saybrook and Saybrook Point, and then someplace in New Haven, they tell me. And of course the Unilever Ponds factory and its role right across from the train station to the community. But no one thinks of Clinton with any of those things in mind. They don't think of Hammonasset, that's in Madison, even though Cedar Island is part of it effectively. And no one thinks of Yale, because that's not there anymore, although its founder's name is on one of the schools. And again, the factory not continuing to be in service, we have a wonderful community of people. And the people run a Japanese restaurant and a great array of businesses, both national over at the Clinton Crossing and also very, very hyper-local businesses, with a lobster bound right down
Lobster
on
Landing,
the Lobster Landing right down on the wharf across from the Clinton Beach. So, if we may, you've given us a hint of how you got into stewardship. You had a mentor that left you suddenly and you felt the responsibility. And I know what you didn't mention about your New York background is that you were a mounted officer in New York. So what brought you to stewardship?
I think if you get into sort of the political side of it, with a lowercase p, my grandmother had always been very political and writing letters and showing up to things that she felt passionate about. Children in school as well. She had been a volunteer in Buffalo Public Schools, and I've always seen that from her, and the same with my mother. So I've always had that sort of instilled in me from the female side of my family. And then I just always participated. I always felt to participate in philanthropic organizations. So I was a auxiliary mounted officer, which is a volunteer officer for New York City Parks Enforcement, and I also sat on the board for that organization. Amazing organization, because you really are out there helping the community. You know, you're not so much addressing the crime that takes place, but you're out there directing people, and there's people who really need help in the community, in the parks, all the parks within New York. So that's where I really started, my passion for giving back to our communities at large.
Well, as a retired firefighter who actually rode in Central Park, I don't think anybody out there can appreciate the bravery of shepherding a horse through the streets of New York and the taxis and everything else. So I think clearly your maternal lineage is strong. And with that, you arrived in Clinton, you participated in the community, and what in heaven's name would lead you to step up, and it is stepping up. It is public service, and the emphasis on service, and the emphasis on small p. Because I think when Tip O'Neill talked about politics being local, he did mean small p, a little like religion. I think of it in a small case sense, and I think many of us are spiritual, even if we're not theologically affiliated. And so with that, you may not be as political large P as people expect of their local elected officials, but what led you to the small p and the service that you're in now?
I think it started when I first moved to Clinton. I saw great infrastructure bones, and I said, why isn't this community boomed? You know, I've traveled around the world. The organization I worked for in Britain revitalized cities and towns around the world through investment, through public and private partnerships, and the government really understanding how to make those communities grow. And I got involved with the Downtown Revitalization Committee. They came up with a plan to help support the downtown for beautification. And then I got involved with the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was on the commission for 8 years. During that time, we did a lot of outreach, so we worked a lot with the library. We had something called a charrette to get public input from our community at large about how to move the community forward, and we developed something called a Plan of Conservation and Development, which is required by the state. Every 10 years you adopt one, and then you move towards implementing the goals. Since we adopted it in 2015, I didn't see any of the implementation taking place from that plan, and I got more and more frustrated from our government officials, our local officials, for not moving it forward and not having the leadership to push forward a plan that the community at large felt as though it was important, because they came out and they participated in all these public meetings. So I started talking more and more about the need for doing that, and when it came to the point where it was time to determine who was going to run for those elected positions, people started saying, why don't you run? You have a vision. Most of the times in, I think, local politics, people don't run with a campaign as to what they're going to do. They just run as a political party, this party or that party, and you sort of fight it out. At the end of the day, what actually gets done. But I had felt very strongly about a vision to move the town forward. So I started to talk about it more, and people were encouraging. So I said, talked with my husband, and we said, we think we can do this. My kids are, they're in school, and I can allocate the time to running for a campaign, and then ultimately I won. Essentially, that's how it all unfolded. That's how it all. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that we have New York City, San Francisco, Britain, I assume London or the area, and Boston, all feeding into this small community of Clinton and informing its future. And yet, you aren't coming in with your own set of ideals. You're drawing, like our founding fathers and mothers, from resources that were made available from that Planning and Zoning Commission study, required, mandated study. And as part of the growth of Clinton and the controlled growth, because people want a community to remain true to itself, we are the land of steady habits here in Connecticut, and I'd be interested to get over to the library for a moment, because looking online, the span of information technology and particularly youth-focused resources available and opportunities available on the calendar fascinated me. So tell me for a moment of that transition from a little brick, one book in, one book out library to what you have today.
Well, and it's been a long, sort of slow, steady response to the community, actually. We started with a part-time programming person, and now we've worked our way up to having somebody who's full-time now, who just does adult programming. We have a young adult librarian who programs for them. We have a head of children's services. And really, that's the need in the community, is it's sign language for babies. It's movement classes for children. We see a lot of parents, but also we see a lot of grandparents now raising either or doing childcare or raising their grandchildren, and they need an outlet for socialization and for education. When you move up to the teens, there's some robotics. We've gotten some great grants nationally and locally to get some robotics for the teens to learn programming. And then also we have, your basic SAT and ACT classes for those kids who can't afford to have private tutoring for college prep. On the adult side, we see a lot of seniors. We have regular wellness programs. We have twice weekly Tai Chi for seniors, for balance, obviously, and again, for socialization. We have movies, we have the DEEP comes out, and then they pack our community room talking about local eagles, bears, coyotes. People are interested in what's happening in their community, and that's where we feel we see the big draw. We have, we're the only place in Connecticut where you can see the Oscar-nominated short films for free, and that's coming up February 16th and the 23rd. And it's
What
last
time?
year, the 12:30. It's a Saturday, 12:30. Last year we had to turn people away. I mean, it's very different than going to the movies. Shorts are, we start with the documentaries, and then we have the live action and the animation on the second Saturday. But it generates conversation. We have conversational programs with TED Talks. We have a volunteer who curates a handful of TED Talks, has some mostly retired folks sit around, watch, and then discuss, and they're usually social topics. So it's in response to the community. And once we do a few things, we get more suggestions, and people are interested in other avenues, and we take it and run. And they've been the response has been outstanding.
What I hear you saying, and I think it's critical and will be a theme throughout this series, Town to Town, is that you listened to the community, you assessed your available resources, the human resources and the physical resources, and then you went to work and said, I don't know how long it'll take, but 15 years into it, here we are.
Right.
And you're not done.
Right.
And
not everything succeeds. We've had some failures, but we try, and we've been very lucky to partner with local businesses and civic organizations both with manpower and with funding. So it's just been, the programming portion of the library business has just been booming.
Fantastic.
Actually,
Well, for what it's worth, I'm going to get a shameless plug in and mention that my son, on the beach at Clinton, where my wife originally wrote a play called Starlight, about the lobstermen and the factory and the children of workers at both. And my son did a 30-minute short at Sarah Lawrence, is now editing it, and hopes to introduce it to the Sundance and
Great.
Santa Barbara and Nantucket Film Festivals. And if it should wind up in any of those places, we'd like to invite you to the red carpet opening.
Yeah.
And then
that's
hopefully
great,
get
yes.
it down to your Oscar
the same, right,
short
right.
series. So again, I want to focus in on the human aspect. You mentioned some of the people. What are their names? Who would people ask for the senior Tai Chi programming
Okay,
and for
so,
the baby sign language?
Right, so Sarah Borgness-Tobin is our adult programming coordinator, and she is, again, open to suggestions, and we have people soliciting programs almost weekly. Kathleen Cole is our teen librarian, and she does just a great job. I mean, in addition to summer reading programs, which are, daunting in the planning process, she's got programs and food, nutrition programs for these kids, and like I said, robotics and, fun craft things just for teens. And then Coralie Williams is our children's services, head of children's services. And she's the one who brings in, we've got yoga for children, sign language, Spanish classes for, and there's a Baby in Me class, which I believe is, babies. It's,
Starting now.
Yeah.
I participated in that.
Right?
With my kids. I spent a lot of time at the library.
Well, and the
as they
other
were
thing,
growing up.
the other thing it does is it builds community. And so if you keep coming every Wednesday for Baby and Me, you meet the same moms that you were here last, and then you've got a little mother's group, or you've got a social group, and you move on. There's some people I know whose kids are in college and out of college who have met in the library.
Well, those babies are going to need
reading,
library cards eventually.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Sooner than later, I hope.
Yes.
I had my first when I was 5, and I'm proud of it.
Right. Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yep.
So to that, the people, you have a vision, and it isn't based on your own personal agenda so much as driven by the community and that planning and zoning organization you were a part of and the study. But there are other people that collaborate with you over at Town Hall and throughout the community and Chamber of Commerce and elsewhere. Tell me about those people.
So, the library, for one, the library really serves as our community center, our senior center. So there's a lot of partnership that takes place there. We're trying to do a little more outreach to our senior community. We don't have a senior center like some of the towns, and so we've started a senior task force. I've got 2 members of the community, Elizabeth Goldstein, and we have, oh goodness, I'm going to blank on her name.
You'll come up with it.
Is it Sarah?
No, well, Sarah's going to participate,
Yeah.
but we also have, oh my goodness, I'll come back to it. So we're going to do an outreach to the community to find a little bit more about what the seniors would like us to do with programming, partnering with the library, partnering with our Human Services Department, which provides meal planning through an Estuary Council of Seniors through Old Saybrook. So we do a meal site on Thursdays, and people can sign up for that, and it's supplemented through programming, federal programming and funding, and Tai Chi as well, and other programming. Right. So we're trying to make sure that we have more robust resources for that community at large. But we also partner with EDC, our Economic Development Commission, to find other resources for the community. We have been doing a lot of forums for our businesses in town. We had a business forum back in last fall, and we brought in different organizations from the state, SBA, CERC, which is Connecticut Economic Resource Center, Workforce Alliance, and we talked about all the resources at the state level, and we allowed the community at large, all the people in the business community, to come to this forum and have their questions answered by these business organizations at the state level. And then we also documented all of it and put it on the town website with all the contact information from these organizations, so they know what the resources are, either through grant programming or workforce partnerships, things like that. So there's a lot of people involved. It's not just myself. There is a lot of boards and commissions, a lot of staff that really moves everything forward. It can't just be one person.
No, it takes a village, as you
Yes,
referred to
absolutely
before.
does.
And it is a village. It's a great village. A lot of community. Go ahead.
Phyllis McGrath.
I
so-
knew you.
sorry.
Oh, there
I knew
it is. Yes,
and in
I knew you were
fairness
looking
to
at
the,
me for
to the
that,
folks
yeah.
watching, full disclosure, they had no idea what we were going to be talking about. I didn't give them any bullet points coming in. So if I'm asking questions that take a moment to pull back names, I'm absolutely going to do the same. Again, disclosure, in Guilford, I was in the economic development for about 10 years. We did manage to hire an economic development director and get the rock pile completed only by convincing the NIMBY folks that having public storage in their backyard, if you've ever watched Silence of the Lambs, is not such a good thing when compared to Bon-Ton or Michael's or Whole Foods. So I'm very appreciative of what your economic development and your Chamber of Commerce folks are doing. I know, I want to make sure I mentioned Lobster Landing, but obviously Chamard Vineyards and the
Right.
bistro and live
Beautiful
music
location.
that they support.
Yes.
Tell me about the other locations around town that you and your husband like to visit.
So we recently had a restaurant move in Nada's. They have 2 other locations in Connecticut, but downtown, which is great to have the vitality of a new restaurant come into the downtown.
Right downtown,
Yeah.
right
downtown.
there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right down from the old one brick building
Corner from-
post office.
Yes.
There you go.
Right across the street from the post
Yeah.
office, yeah.
And they made the organization, the building owner made a significant investment into the community to bring in that restaurant, so we're very thankful for them to do it.
So what's Nada's about?
Nada's is, I'm not going to say, I would say it's sort of an eclectic American cuisine.
Great.
They pull from all different cultures. They probably want to do their own PR, but
No, but I'm asking just, you're the first select one.
prefix menu, and you go in, you have to spend, plan for at least 3 hours, and it's so casual, and you
nice,
bring a
yeah.
whole bunch of friends, and the night just goes so quickly, you don't even realize that you've been there for 3 hours. So place is packed all the time. It's hard even to get a reservation, so you have to reach out early to do it. But
Plus, it's in the old Clinton National Bank.
Oh,
And so they
what
didn't
a
really
great
touch
location.
the outside,
I
so
know
it
exactly
still
where.
looks, it still looks like the old bank.
Great.
But once you get inside, and they've left a lot of the historic pieces in the windows, so it's kind of a throwback. It's
Yes.
nice.
It's so subtle that I remembered seeing it
Right?
when we were going scouting locations for the footage, because we went over to outside of Ponds and then across to the train station and down the way, and the old gazebo behind the post office, and it was so discreet. It's
Yes.
so well blended into the community. And I come from working in a town where their sign requirements are black and white and very restrictive. And I thought, what a wonderful, discreet way of introducing a new restaurant. And of course, you've got great restaurants here. Rocky's Aqua is a destination for
Right.
anybody looking for seafood. But, and Chamard again for a flight of wines with a nice,
you've got Dina Vella's Italian, you've got
Taste
Shanks
of
across
China.
from Lobster Landing. With all, in the summertime when you go down there, it's just absolutely
Yes.
packed. But people cannot get enough. They were, I think, one of the Connecticut Mavens top 10 restaurants in the state at one point. We have got a lot of
Yeah.
great
We have a lot
restaurants.
of choices. It's nice, yeah.
And Lobster Landing, a classic lobster destination at a time when the lobster fisheries are all are challenged. He actually, the owner there, gave my wife a lot of background on what was going on and whether the factory had been involved or really the global warming and the lobster fisheries really migrating north to where it was colder. Wonderful source of information and knowledgeable. And that's what you find anytime you stop and talk with anybody in Clinton. They're open, they are available to give you whatever you need to know. And both of you moved here, and you know that. And having been from upstate Connecticut, I moved up to upstate New York for a time and went down to Pennsylvania for school and met my wife in New York. And I too, with the new marriage, wound up back in Connecticut. So you do appreciate, I think, what a wonderful state it is for communities and what a wonderful community Clinton represents. I really think Guilford and Madison and particularly Clinton are most reflective of what outsiders think of when they think of Connecticut. It's got the rocky shore, it's got the fishery and the marinas, it's got 2,000 boats within 2 miles of Cedar Marina, Cedar Point Marina, I think it is. And it's got the beautiful children's beach and inviting inland horseback vineyard. And then finally, the relationship with its northern neighbor. I mentioned Madison and Westbrook on either side, but I held off on Killingworth, or as it was originally called, Kenilworth,
Right.
from the English spelling. And this was originally part of what was Hammonasset, and then the village of Kenilworth. And so, as I understand it, the Killingworth residents continue to have access to the beach
They do.
and be part of the Clinton community, even as they're a separate township.
And we've got a great relationship with the selectmen up in Killingworth,
Yes.
Kathy Eno, and a lot of shared
And the library up there, right, a lot of shared resources. Yeah.
And actually, Kathy was going to be our first guest, but she was so busy with budget season, which is a shout out to you, because you're also
It is
busy
looming,
with budget
yes.
season.
We're knee deep in
And
it,
your
yes.
time is precious, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time now. This is not a wrap up, this is just an acknowledgement of what you did by putting your time in here, because I very much wanted this program starting so that folks could see their communities. But that leads me right to the sausage making. And so, especially because obviously schools are 2/3 of most communities' budgets. Leaving your 4 schools out of it, although we benefited from Morgan School. My son actually danced with Allegra dance program on
Oh.
Morgan several years. And young folks that I work with here in Westbrook are graduates, proud graduates of Morgan School. If you would, give us an idea of what you're going through right now from the library's perspective, from the town's perspective. And I know intimately, I was a fire chief in Fairfield, and I know when GE left, we had to cut back critical services. So tell me what it is as you try and grow Clinton while retaining its character, and as you build this library over 15 years. Tell me what that process is. Tell our guests, our viewers, what that process is like.
Well, I think for me, coming in my first year, the budget was a little bit preset at that point, so it was a challenge to step in and really analyze where we were going and what we could do. At this point, there's a lot of changes happening at place at the state level that's going to impact the town budgets. There's a lot of things that are unfunded mandates on the town that we have to absorb. And there's also increases that we have no control over. So MIRA, which is our recycling and our waste site in the state, is going to have significant increases, as well as water, all the same things everybody experiences at home. We have the same increases that are going to impact the town, so we have to accommodate them through our budgeting process, as well as making sure we have the appropriate staffing to comply with the statutory requirements of running a government, a municipal government. We fund part of the library's budget. We fund part of the volunteer fire department's budget as well. So we want to make sure that from the public safety standpoint that we're funding everything appropriately for the public's obviously safety. But I'll let
Yeah, I mean,
Beth
I
speak
feel
to
like we're always asked to do more with less, and I think that's the same in every department. When times are bad, that's when people come to the library, and then our funding gets whittled away. I don't know where that thought went, but anyway, so the reason people come or one of the reasons people come to our library is the programming, and it's the people, it's the personnel, it's the feel that you get when you get in there. So it's always hard to balance being able, and I put personnel before anything else, is to keep that feel and those people in the building, and still be able to keep the collection fresh and keep it new services coming in, programming. So we're always looking for grants, for funding partners, for just partners in general. With like the Land Conservation Trust, the Human Services, the Police Department. We're always doing programs together just to sort of consolidate our resources. But it always seems to be, more with less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, fire service, we got the
Yeah.
same. And for what it's worth, I was very impressed that you were bringing in, pardon me, at a time when people are going to be coming to the library doing job searches.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
they may not have the money to have internet at home, and so they come to you, and
It's-
seniors are coming to you.
yes.
and a place where seniors who may still want to be engaged and help folks with businesses or what have you can connect with
Right.
their younger
Right.
counterparts. But you're also reaching out to not just the local taxpayers and state resources, but private sector and possibly federal grants, from what you said. It does take a village, and the village is national and international, and your experience in Britain and what have you. We live in a democratic republic, and we live in a place where people bemoan the economics. A new governor, a budget that's been challenging, and in my community, the local representative had a shot taken at her front door when she voted in favor of taxes because she realized that the alternative was following Bridgeport's threat to go bankrupt. And so as much as I see folks in the social media unhappy with taxes, and I have new kids across the street that would come to me with their very first paycheck and say, why is all this money taken out? And I would simply say, well, did you drive on streets? Were they lit? Was there police and fire and ambulance protection?
Right.
That's government. That is small p politics. And those villages that grow our children from sign language to seniors and Tai Chi are us. And a young lady across the street said something so simple that it knocked me out, but she just said, we need us. We in this nation that's polarized with the little isms and letters after names and the carved out sectors that appeal to the far left or far right, we need us. We are a nation of states and cities and municipalities, townships that only function collectively. So, having said that, what was your biggest surprise this first year in office?
Yeah, in my position, I'd say the biggest surprise was the, addressing where we're going to go as an organization from a staffing level. I don't think there's ever been a real focus of how to structure town hall from the staff perspective. We haven't created succession planning. We are required to have all these positions in town hall, and we have to statutorily fill these positions because there's an obligation to do the roles in municipal government. But we haven't allowed for because of the budgetary issues we've had, we haven't created a layer in of people that are going to be trained in succession planning to go up and fill positions as people retire. And this is going to happen across the state as well. All the other municipalities that are in the regional planning agency, we've talked about the impacts. There's a glut of retirements that are taking place, and we do not have the people underneath to start filling those positions, both from a municipal level not being able to fund layering in people. Everybody has a very narrow band of what their job is, but then also we just don't have the people, the resources that are trained for those specific positions, from zoning enforcement office, building inspectors, finance directors, all across the gamut. There's going to be an issue of filling those positions across the state, and that also goes to the state having the ability to attract new families that want to come to the community and grow into the community and take these jobs as well.
As you both did.
Yes.
I mean, it's critical that we recognize that all of us have been brought back to Connecticut for its resources, and now it's up to us to take that stewardship mantle and pass it forward. And you sound like you're laser focused on just that. And it brings to another point. Speaker Sharkey, back almost 10 years ago, started the Moore Commission and the different regional panels. What are you exploring, if you're able to talk, and you may not be, there's politics involved with all of that too, with regionalism? Tell me what you see as that.
So I'll let Mary Beth, I'm not sure, I know you have your resources around.
Well, I mean, librarians are a little unique in that they share with everybody. I mean, as far as say block programming, you know, if we bring in a nice speaker, we're able to reach out to other libraries, and you know, if maybe he's whoever it is, a price we're not able to pay, if we can block it with Killingworth and Guilford and Madison, and this speaker can come in one day and do 4 programs, then you know, that's we have regional like little subcommittees. The Valley Shore Library directors get together quarterly and talk about what's happening and how, one thing that happens in Chester, even though it's this big, can affect, Westbrook or Clinton, or how we've dealt with issues. So there's always been a lot of sharing in libraries, always. So,
I think it's
but as far as
nature.
building is concerned, or nothing really as far as
Well, you raised something interesting.
Resources, for
I had to
sure.
pick up a textbook for my son up in Haddam, about 3 doors down from Senator Dodd's house. And we chatted about our Guilford librarian, whom I got the privilege to meet before she passed, who founded the library there. But you're right, libraries, Mark Twain we can thank for his sensibility and,
Right.
and the sharing. And coming from the fire service, and you mentioned the Clinton Volunteer Fire Department, mutual aid pacts go back to Benjamin Franklin. So everything old is new again. And with the libraries sharing, with the fire department having their mutual aid pacts, and obviously now with the legislature talking about shared regional school districts even more than what's in existence now, what, without putting you on the spot, and I'm not here to do that, what do you see in the future for Clinton in a regional sense that takes advantage of not just Killingworth, which is really part of your community, but also Madison, Westbrook, and points east and west?
Well, there's some things we're already doing, like the Animal Pound. We have shared resource there. You have Mura, which is the waste recycling, so it's a regional thing as well. We have a partnership with a number of towns with our health districts,
Right.
and that is certainly something that the state is going to start to put more pressure on municipalities to have a regional focus to that as well, as opposed to having individuals within each town that do that function. And also, we're finding that with a regional health district, we actually have more robust services to the community. We had the flu program, flu shot program. We've got a lot of different things that we wouldn't normally see in a one person function in a town hall who does inspections. So that's benefited the community as well. And then they're also able to go after a lot more grants when you're operating as a regional organization. Town of Clinton is with a number of other groups in a healthcare cooperative as well, so that we can broker better health coverage and then also rates for the municipality. So there's ways that the municipalities find to create those resources that are not available yet. A lot of it's challenging because we hear a lot of comments from the state saying the municipalities need to address the inefficiencies, and I sort of push it back and say the state needs to address where they see the inefficiencies, or what they envision are inefficiencies are probably statutory requirements that we're applied to do, or they are things that the state has not created the structure for us to actually create those regional services. A lot of conversations happen around the dispatch systems and things like, regionalizing that service. It becomes very challenging unless you create that broad structure to do it, and also the funding mechanisms to do it. And so right now, there's certainly conversations about that, and there's funding, but it's challenging. You need to make sure, first and foremost, you get all the partners in the room and everybody wants to do it, because if people are not willing to do it, it makes it very challenging.
One of the places that I'm familiar with in the fire service, with 345 separate and distinct fire departments across the state, out of our 169 municipalities, is how difficult it is to get folks to merge their vision. And so having a municipality be willing to share makes both communities feel a little nervous that are they ceding opportunity, authority, resource. But I will tell you, after being on that Moore Commission and looking at over 200 different maps, I would certainly not hold municipal leaders responsible. There were, just for example, 5 congressional districts and 5 emergency management districts, but they don't match. 8 counties. We used to have county dispatch. When I was a dispatcher 30-some years ago, we had to check the county radio every week, and they still do. But because of all of this splintering of authority and no one being willing to cede back any of that authority, it will take, hopefully, visionaries like yourselves, and not necessity, to make those mergers happen.
I think it's a little of both.
Agreed.
I think it's going to be an active legislature. It's going to be municipal. It's going to have to be both, I believe.
Agreed, and that's why all politics is local. So Senator Needleman and Representative McLaughlin, from opposite sides of the aisle and in different houses or chambers, will need to work on behalf of Clinton and Westbrook and Killingworth and their greater constituencies to see to it that you aren't put in the position of explaining to the community why taxes on property are impacted when it's really, many of these are regional, county, state, federal, and perhaps private sector, back when they were reinventing government 20 years ago, opportunities that could be mergers and collaborations. But those dialogues can't happen with one person in a room. They have to happen with us, and that's why we're here today. I will tell you, I've been in both of your buildings, and if the folks out front have not been, you must come visit the library and avail yourself of all the wonderful people and books and videos and DVDs and all the technology available. And if they've never been, and I can't imagine that they haven't been, Andrews Theater and the Clinton Town Hall are astonishing works of art, of architecture, and filled with works of art. And sometimes on the stage, the Opera Theater of Connecticut, the Mad Hatters, where my son did several plays, the Connecticut Playwrights Theater, which was in residence there for a time, and the incredible community centers that those two buildings represent, that you are good enough to manage to the rest of our good fortune, are each one a day's visit, and you'll find further days to come back and do more exploration. Because from the cat in residence downstairs, if he still is.
Not there any longer.
No.
He was legend.
He's moved on to his maker, I feel.
So I figured. But all the way to the blue lit cupola and every nook and cranny at the library. I don't think there's a chair over there I haven't sat in one time or another. Some of them in hidden places, and I love it. It's a wonderful place to while away a rainy day, or to sit in the sun streaming through the window and enjoy what Clinton is, and learn more about what Clinton is through the Historical Society, through your records there at the library, through your documents there at Town Hall. I know you're very generous hosts both to your buildings, and I would suggest to anybody to come on down and introduce themselves to you and find out what your local leaders are doing. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Is there anything you want to say to the folks that are watching and tell them about the library?
I think I mentioned our Oscar shorts, which I think is pretty special. And
what are those dates again and times?
February 16th and the 23rd. They're 2 consecutive Saturdays. Doors open at 12:15. The movies start at 12:30. The first 25 through the door get swag bags.
Oh, nice.
Swag bags.
And
it's
you
like going to
right?
LA.
And you cannot see these anywhere else for free in Connecticut. So
fantastic.
It's pretty exciting. Yeah.
And that's just
Documentary's the first one, and then the second day is the shorts and the animation. Yes.
Well, I'm going to try and get my
yeah,
son
it's
back
really,
out.
They're really fun. You know, they're just interesting, and it's amazing what they can put together in a short period of time. You know, an entire story can be told. Yeah. And the animation is not all, Looney Tunes. It's some very
CGI
serious
nowadays.
Yes, but it's all some are serious topics. It's
they're
great.
I'm learning a great deal. As a film student at Penn State, I knew a few things, but my son, as Mark Twain told us, knows so much more than his father at 20. And I'm hoping to get him and his classmate, J.J. Abrams' son, Henry Abrams, up for that weekend, because both of them obviously are big fans. And I don't know that they'll make it in time for a swag bag, because college kids rarely get up in time for a 12:15 opening. But to your point, 180 separate and unique shots from Clinton Beach, from Lobster Landing, from a Sears catalog building over in Westbrook, and a number of other locations through the courtesy of the Valley Shore Community Television for the resources that they provided. This short is going to wind up, again, aired here, and also may make your Oscars next year.
Wow,
Wouldn't
who
that be
knows?
nice?
That would be very exciting.
But we'll try and get them up.
And you can coin the term, the jewel of the showy line, you know, share it as broad as.
That's
Right,
right. Well, it is the
absolutely.
jewel of
It
Shoreline.
really
Libraries
is.
always are.
Yes.
So tell us anything else you want to your family, your friends, your colleagues, your folks up in Hartford that are toiling away to
Well,
do
I
the right
always,
thing.
I always like to do the pitch of the community at large, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do in Clinton without our volunteers and people sit on boards
So
and
many good
commissions.
people, yeah.
So many people participate, and even
So much
the
time.
meal sites and the donations through restaurants to programming. I think we are an unusual community in that we support. All the
Yes.
volunteers support the community at the end of the day, and we need to recognize them because they hold Clinton together. And I think it's an important aspect of who we are.
And all the
that's-
small businesses who support, you know, who are willing to sponsor programs and, you know, parades and, you know. you name
And
it,
maintain the
yes.
integrity of the buildings that
Exactly,
they occupy.
exactly.
And extraordinary. You've got the Bluefish Festival. You've got do they still do the Christmas Tree Festival at Old Town Hall?
We just do the Christmas in Clinton
Yeah.
with that's with the Chamber of Commerce. Yes.
My son remembers that from 5, but he swears there was a sleigh that drove down Post Road.
Well, there used to be a hay wagon.
Yeah, no,
so
I remember the hay
that's-
wagon, but he insists
He
that
thinks
I'm,
it was a sleigh.
I'm wrong. And hopefully by 21 he'll learn how much his father has learned in
Well,
3 years.
yeah.
But Twain may not be accurate based on my assessment. That said, we just lost President George H.W. Bush, who reminded us all about the 1,000 points of light when he was in office, and I think Clinton has many more than 1,000. I've been privileged to be illuminated by a number of those myself, and you are 2 of them. So I thank you
Thank
for your
you.
service.
Thank you so
I
much.
thank you for taking your time
Thank
away
you.
from budget season to come down and join us. And I invite everybody to come back for the next show. I'm not sure which community we're going to be hosting, but we're privileged to have our original show in the series with the company of Clinton. So thank you with a conversation about Clinton, and go Patriots, and little shout out to the folks up in Boston who are braving the
Absolutely.
cold
Oh, I know.
50-degree
Perfect
temperatures in
parade day.
February.
Perfect parade.
So good on you. And for the folks that were cheering for the LA Rams, sorry about that. There's always next year. So with that, we'll leave you to your business, and I'll send folks back to their regularly scheduled programming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.